Hello, this is Reindeer's Bees, and this is part 2 of the Beginner's Guide to Beekeeping. So the topic today is going to be how to install your package or how to install your nuke. I'm not really going to talk about the pros and cons and which one I think is better. I'll link the video where I talk about that up there. So today I'm just going to talk about how to physically install them. With a package, there's a lot of different ways, but with a nuke, it's more simple, and I think there's generally one way that the vast majority of people do it. So I'm going to talk about that first. From what I've seen, nukes are either sold in some kind of I think this is chloroplast plastic, like this. It's got some frame rest inside. Yep. And this is from my producer of nukes, Swan's Honey. Really like their nukes. I also see this as a really common way for your nukes to come. It's called the Jester Easy Nuke Box. And, you know, it's just got a frame rest right there. And the entrance is right here. So you just pull this tab up and bend it like this to open it, and it opens up. All right, so now that I showed you the boxes, let's talk about the actual installing of the nuke. So when you're installing a nuke, what you want to do is put the hive out, your nuke box on the hive stand where you want it to be, on your cinder blocks or whatever you're using as a hive stand. Open up the entrance right when you get home and make sure that the bees are able to fly and get out. And so the bees will then orient to their new location. Now, once they've done that, I'd come back a couple hours later and they've been sitting open, able to get outside and fan if they need to cool the hive down. And then that's when you want to install your nukes. So pull off your nuke and move it down on the ground next to your stand. Then put your new 10 frame box on top. You want to install it into a bigger box to make sure that those bees have plenty of space and don't want to swarm. So if you leave it in that box for a while, they might just swarm right out. So you want to make sure that they're in the 10 frame box. And so this is how I would install them. So I would take out 2 of the frames you should have 5 frames in your new box that you're putting on the stand, and then you'll install 5 more. So take 2 of those empty frames, set them on the ground next to the hive. Once you've done that, you should then go ahead and start taking the frames out of your nuke. And if you're taking out the first frame, starting from the left, going to the right out of the nuke, you want to take the first frame from the left and put it on the opposite side of the nuke and just keep going. So you want to keep the hive, like the pattern or order of frames the same. So you want to keep them all next to each other. Once you've got those 5 frames from the nuke into the box, and then you already left 3 in there, so then you have 8, then you can stick in those 2 last frames on the edge. So you're just, by leaving those 2 frames out of the hive, then you're not squishing any bees trying to shove the frames in that have bees on them. So if you just leave those frames out at the beginning, it makes it easier at the end. It makes it so you crush less bees. So that's how I'd suggest you install your nuke. The key thing about nukes is when you're transporting them, you want to make sure that they don't overheat. So if you can't leave them in your car for a while because they'll overheat in the car. It's really not good. Once you get them home and you put them out on that stand, make sure that you open the box, because in the hot sun, they can overheat and die. You need to open up the box, whatever that means for you, depending on how they were transported, and make sure that they're able to get outside and fan. So that's really important that you do that. So on to packages, how to install a package. So here is the typical package. I don't really buy packages anymore, but I still have this in my garage. And the middle part will come with a can of sugar syrup, or well, I think it's actually corn syrup, but regardless, feed in there, in this, in a can. And then also the queen will be attached to a piece of plastic that hangs down into the cage, and the bees cluster around her. So once you pull out the queen in the feed jar, then what I like to do, there's a lot of ways to do package installs, I'll talk about a few ways, is you just set the queen in between the frames in the middle of the box, and then you just shake them out onto the frames. And don't be afraid to bang the bees around a little bit and make sure that they get in there, because if you just lightly shake, a lot of them are going to stick in that package. And if they stay in that package and it's a cold day, they are not going to make it. They're going to die in the package. So you need to make sure that you're getting all the bees and shaking pretty hard to get all the bees out. Don't be afraid. Bees have really strong exoskeletons, so you don't have to worry about hurting the bees. So that's one way to do it. Another way that I've seen a lot of people do it on YouTube is they'll open the package, put the queen down under the frames, and take out the feed can. They'll set the package on top of the inner cover and put an extra box on top, and they'll just let the bees walk down into the hive around the queen. This works great if it's warm, but if it's really cold, if it's like, 30 or 40 degrees when you're installing the package, it's better to shake it, because if you let them stay in the package without shaking, then they may not find the queen and cluster around her, and she could die of being cold. So make sure that if it's a cold day, you shake them, and if it's not a cold day, you can just let them walk down into the frames and cluster around the queen. The other way I've seen barnyard bees do this is he will, if it's a really warm day, we're talking like 70s, and you have some packages that have like inches of dead bees in the bottom, what you can do is shake them out on the ground in front of your hive, and the bees will climb right up into the hive and to the queen. The important thing is it has to be very warm for this, and the reason why he does it this way is because all the dead bees in that package are on the ground, and so if he shook them on top of the hive, the bees would have to take all those dead bees out of the hive, and this way only the live bees are coming in, so they never have to take out a bunch of dead bees. So that's how you install a package. I think there are a couple other ways, but those are the most common ways. When you're installing a package, most of the packages come with wooden queen cages, and they have corks on both sides, and one side has candy on it. In these queen cages, you want to take the cork out on the candy side, and that way the bees slowly chew through the candy to eat the candy to get to the queen and release her so she can start laying eggs. And I suggest you check your queen maybe 5 to 7 days after you've installed the package to make sure she's out, and then you can release her if they haven't chewed her out. Most of the time they will have. And make sure that you're feeding your package once you install it, even if it's on drawn comb, unless you put a lot of honey in the frames. Make sure that you have the feed onto those hives as soon as you're done installing, because if they have just foundation and nothing in the box, and they're going to need a lot of feed because it's a small hive and they don't have very many foragers to go out and find food. So you want to make sure that you're feeding them right away, pretty much infinitely for the next, at least 3 or 4 weeks. Just see how it goes, but make sure you're feeding those first few weeks after you install the package. Likewise with the nuke, you should also be feeding the nuke, because it also doesn't really have a foraging force and not used to the new location. And if you have only foundations, no comb, that you're installing them on, then it's a lot of work for them to do, and they'll probably only be able to do that if you feed them sugar water. For nukes, I suggest to feed 1 to 1, so that is 8 pounds of sugar to 16 cups of water, which is 1 gallon of water. And that should make 1 to 1 sugar syrup. And what you should do with that is just put it in a feeder on top of your hive and make sure they're well fed for the first couple weeks. You don't want to just keep feeding them without checking the hive, because it's possible to feed them too much and that can cause them to swarm, but it's important that they have that food early on to propel them to doing well. Like and subscribe, comment down below, hit that bell to be notified when I upload. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Reindeers Bees. I'll see you in the next one.